words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So in our discipleship services this year, we're looking at the Apostles' Creed. Last month we had the introduction to the creeds, looking at how we got the creeds and why it's important for us to study them. And this month we're starting to look at the creed itself and to go through some of the all of the statements in it and think about what they mean. So we're starting with the first four words of the Apostles' Creed: I believe in God. When we stand up and say, I believe in God, we are literally taking a stand in a godless culture. The culture around us is not godless because they don't have any gods or because they don't believe in the supernatural, but it's godless because they reject the one true God that we stand and declare our faith in. So we're going to look this morning at the differences between what our friends, our family and our culture believe in and what we mean when we stand and say, I believe in God. Recently there's been a shift in attitude. For most of the past 50 or 60 years, atheism was the fashionable belief. And if you said that you believed in God, you were looked down on. Belief in God was seen as a primitive thing, something that intellectuals don't believe in, that we've moved past that primitive belief in God. We are now enlightened and we work by reason and logic, not by faith. Belief in God was seen as something that was for weak people who needed a psychological crutch. Some people who can't stand on their own 2 feet and need something else to believe in. But in recent years, there's been more openness to the idea of God and even to the idea of God as expressed in organised religions as well. So now is a good time to stand and say boldly, I believe in God. But as we do so, we also need to know what we mean when we say, I believe in God, and how that differs from other beliefs about God and the supernatural. And that's one of the reasons why this year we're going to be looking through the Apostles' Creed, so that we can have confidence to be able to stand and say and declare what it is we believe and why we believe it. But even when atheism was fashionable, people still believed in the supernatural, in the realm of the non-material. Beliefs were very common. Beliefs in things like magic, or ghosts, or unicorns, or angels, Father Christmas, and around this time, belief in love. And also many people believed in dead relatives returning and appearing as robins or as feathers. All of these beliefs in supernatural, non-material things express that yearning for something beyond the ordinary, and a yearning for something beyond the ordinary, even if it is something that is fictional. The question, therefore, is, does it matter if what we believe in is a lie? Does it matter if it's fictional, if it brings comfort or makes us feel good? Well, of course, it matters what we believe in and whether that is true or fictional, because belief in fictional things, in the fictitious, can only bring false comfort and false hope. And to live our lives on the basis of fictional beliefs can be a very dangerous thing indeed. You can believe in unicorns as firmly and sincerely as you want, but if you refuse medical treatment because you think you'll find a unicorn and its horn will bring you healing, then you've got a huge problem. When we stand and declare, I believe in God, it's not a wishful thinking. It's not just a yearning for something outside of the ordinary, whether it's fictional or not. When we stand and say, I believe in God, we're declaring something that's based on reason, logic, and historically verifiable events. And we'll see more about that as we work through the rest of the creed. The belief that we have when we say, I believe in God, is not belief as wishful thinking or yearning, but belief as firm trust in what we know to be true. So what do our friends or our family or the culture around us believe in? If we ask that question, they'll probably say that they believe that there is something out there, there is a greater power, there's something beyond the material, and they might be quite happy to call that whatever God, and use that word as a kind of shorthand for believing in something supernatural, even if they don't really understand what that is or couldn't describe what it is they actually believe in. Many years ago, you might remember the comedy show Not the 9 O'Clock News, and they had a sketch in that called The Apostles' Creed, where the actors there stood in a kind of church-like setting to recite a creed, and it started with these words: I believe in God, the Father Almighty, or at least it stands to reason that there has to be some sort of greater power, like electricity. Of course, we will see in the Apostles' Creed the God that we believe in is very different from that definition of God. But that is often people's concept of what God is like, just some sort of greater power, something that is impersonal, like electricity. But part of the humour of that Not the 9 O'Clock News sketch is that if that is what you believe in as God, then you probably wouldn't stand up to declare it, because it's not really worth standing up and declaring your faith in it. Belief in such a God wouldn't really make any difference whatsoever. And that's probably why people believe that that's what God is like, because it's undemanding. And that's why you'll often hear people say things like, I believe in God, but I'm not religious. They want the comfort of belief in something more than this world, something more than this life, but they don't want it to actually make an impact on the way that they live their life. They instinctively know that to truly believe in God means that it will have an effect on the way that they live their life. They can no longer say, it's my life, my rules. When we say, I believe in God, we acknowledge his authority over us. As we said in the Methodist Covenant service a few weeks ago, that great prayer of commitment to God starts with the words, I am no longer my own, but yours. It is an acknowledgement of God's authority over us and over our lives. We're not saying it's my life, my rules, but instead we say to God, it's your world and your rules. But this belief that people have, this kind of belief, yet not belief in God, is nothing new. Paul describes something very similar in Romans chapter 1. He says, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. Paul is reminding us that belief in God is a plain belief in God, because God has made it plain, made knowledge of himself plain, because he reveals his existence and his qualities through creation. When we look out at the world and the universe, we can't help but think that someone is out there who has made it, and this person must be magnificent because of the creation is magnificent itself. So belief in God, that inkling that there is something out there, something beyond the world that we can see, is something that God has made plain to us through creation. And that is why, even when atheism was at the height of its popularity, belief in something other, belief in something supernatural, never went away, because it's something that is there and plain and obvious to us as we look around the world, as we look at creation, as we look at the stars and the planets. Belief in God is something that is displayed to us through those things. But Paul says, even though God has made his existence plain to us, he has revealed himself through creation. He goes on to say in verse 21, "For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him." So the problem was not that they couldn't they couldn't believe that there was a God, but the problem was that they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. They neither glorified him, they don't acknowledge his authority over them, nor did they give him thanks. They didn't acknowledge their dependence on him. They neither acknowledged his authority over them or their dependence on him. Instead, he says, they worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie. And that's not just talking about worshipping false gods, but also about running after those things that become gods in our life. Things like money, fame, success, power, anything else that is the driving force, the driving aim of anyone's life becomes the God that they worship and they serve. So Paul says they claim to be wise, but instead became fools. Paul is describing here that kind of belief, yet not belief. They know God, but they neither glorify him nor give him thanks. And that's the same as a lot of people, our friends, our family, a lot of our culture. They know God, they understand that there is something out there, but they will not glorify him nor give him thanks. They will not acknowledge God's authority over them, nor will they acknowledge their dependence on him. So it's not that they cannot believe in God, but it is that they will not believe in God. They don't want to believe in God because they understand some of the implications of belief in him. This is a problem not of the heart, but of the head, what Paul describes in verse 18 as being godlessness and wickedness. So when it comes to talking to our friends and our family and those around us about God, when it comes to evangelism, the difficulty is not to get them to believe in God, to believe that God exists, because the evidence is all around them. They already have that inkling deep inside that there is something out there, that God, whatever that is, exists. The problem is they don't want to glorify him or give him thanks. They don't want to acknowledge his rule over them, nor to acknowledge their dependence on him. They don't want to recognize that it's his world and therefore his rules. And they don't want to recognize that part of being dependent on him is to acknowledge that we only know about him because he reveals himself to us. The only way we can know about God is God revealing himself to us, which he has done in creation first and foremost. And this means that it's not our clever thinking that makes us think about God or to know about him. It's not what we can do with our minds. If God hadn't revealed himself to us, we would never be able to understand him. And so this is a challenge to our human sense of superiority, that we can do anything if we try hard enough. We could not be able to know anything about God unless he had revealed himself to us. That is part of our dependence on him. And also that therefore means that we don't really know anything about the world or ourselves unless God reveals it to us as well. We cannot understand about ourselves through our own clever thinking or discovery. Only by listening to God can we understand truly about ourselves, but we wouldn't be able to do it in the first place if he hadn't revealed himself to us and enabled us to do it. We are utterly dependent on him for all those things that we think are humankind's best achievements. As we look through the rest of the creed, we're going to think more about who the God is who has revealed himself to us, what God is like. But there are two aspects that I want to note today. The first is in those four words, as we stand and declare, I believe in God, that has a very important implication that's brought out in the Nicene Creed, where the first words of the Nicene Creed is, we believe in one God. So when we stand and say I believe in God, we're making a very specific declaration. We're not saying that there are many gods in the world and this is the one that our particular group believes in. We are saying there is only one God, and that is the God that we believe in. And if we say there is only one God, that necessarily means that all other gods are false and wrong. And the God who reveals himself to us through the scriptures, if other things come along and say things that are contradictory to that, and therefore we can say that we don't have to believe them because what we believe in the one true God. So to stand and say, I believe in one God, is still quite a controversial thing because there's still that sense in society that everyone can have their own ideas of God. But we stand and say, I believe in one God. I believe in the God. And that is expanded upon who that God is in the rest of the creed. But one thing to note, as we start this journey in thinking about who that God is that we believe in, is to say that the one and only God is the Jesus God. Second reading from John chapter 14, Jesus says some very striking sentences. He says, trust in God, trust also in me, which could also be translated, believe in God, believe also in me. He says, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. He says, I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. And he says that a couple of times. He says, it is the Father living in me who is doing his work. Jesus is very clear. He and the Father are one. That if you want to know what God is like, you need to look at Jesus. Not just because he does what the Father tells him, not just because he is the image of God, he is the imitator of God, but because he is God incarnate, that Jesus is the one God that we believe in. And we'll see some of the implications of that in future weeks. But for now, we need to note that Jesus is the one who reveals the Father to us. We have that inkling about that God exists. God has revealed his existence to us and some of his qualities through creation. But the fullness of his revelation is in Jesus. Jesus is the one that we look at if we want to understand what God is like. And so Jesus has that famous saying, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. As we stand and declare, I believe in God and I believe in one God, as we have that exclusive claim that the God we believe in is the one true God, we also have an exclusive claim that Jesus is the only way to get to that God. Jesus is the only way to understand who that God is. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He's not just a way, a truth, or a life. He's not just someone who's got some very interesting insights into divinity or into the supernatural. When we say, I believe in God, and as we go through the rest of the creed, we will understand that it is in Jesus alone that we find that full revelation of who God is. God reveals his existence and some of his qualities in creation, but we can only fully know him through Jesus' words and his actions, and through that belief that Jesus himself is God. So at the start of the creed, we stand to declare, I believe in God. And some of our friends and families might not believe that there is a God, even though the evidence of creation all around them declares that there is a God. Others might believe that there is something out there, but that whatever is out there is impersonal, or we can't be certain about what it's like. In his letter to the Romans, Paul reminds us that God has revealed his existence through the creation. And so everyone, no matter how strongly atheist they are, has that inkling that there is something out there, something more than this world or this life. When Paul visited Athens, he looked around at all the temples and all the altars to all the various gods. And he spotted one that said, to the unknown God. And he stood up in front of all the Athenians and said, I see you have an altar to an unknown God. I am going to tell you who that God is that you think is unknown. We have a very similar situation in our culture too. We have lots of people, the majority of people, who will admit to belief in something supernatural, something beyond the ordinary, something beyond this world and this life. What we can do is say, I can proclaim to you that God that you think is out there, you think you have an inkling of. I can tell you about who that God is, and that God, that one true God, is the God who reveals himself to us in Jesus. If you want to know about who that God is that reveals himself to us in creation, reveals his existence to us in creation, let me take you to Jesus. And then, starting there, we can talk about who that God is that we stand and declare, I believe in the one true God, the God revealed by Jesus.